All right. One, one, two. There you go. So yes, there you go. There you go. There you go. We are in our last spring meeting. Incredible. Time passed by, or maybe it doesn't. Who knows? We can maybe philosophize about it, about time. But the point is that today is the day that we say goodbye to our spring series of meetings, and next week it will be our summer. So don't worry, don't be despair, don't be crushed. I know it's hard, but honestly, we just see each other next week, summer, and like otherwise, but we just have a different type of planifications for all of you. So it should be fine, not much of a heartbreak. Again, my name is Ferdinando Castro Gonzalez. I see Orlando here. I'm not sure if Yusha is here, but we are your officers. So it is our duty to make sure that this conversation goes as smooth as possible. We also have Nancy as our advisor, so he sometimes says something nice, sometimes he doesn't. But he's there to make sure that we do our roles, and there we are. We are here. Um, I will explain the house rules again for those who are kind of new. We use the chat for everything, so if you don't have access to the chat, please let me know so you can read it. Normally, the way it goes is that we type an exclamation mark on the chat, so we know the order of who is speaking. We don't go by the hand raising because I never completely know who was the first one or who was the second one. And sometimes the conversation extends too much and it's hard to know exactly the order. So please refer to the chat. If you are a little bit shy, don't despair. You don't have to actually speak. You can always just type it out and I will read it for you so it is in the recording. Uh, yes, and I don't know if I'm missing something, but I'm sure that Nancy has announcements. So I will just give my first Nancy.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. All right, y'all. The last meeting of the academic year. Again, to second Fernando's sentiments, time does fly. So before we get into it today, yeah, a few things. First of all, shout out to the Dallas College Art Club who collaborated with us at last week's meeting. It was a lot of fun. They came in, they had a number of different works of art to show, and they brought out the art and politics theme, which was the discussion topic. So yeah, it was great to have them. That was our second collaboration of the semester. So yeah, very cool. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I encourage y'all to check out the Dallas College Philosophy Club on social media if you want to see previous recordings of the meetings, especially with the collaborations. Yeah, we're on YouTube. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We have our own website, all that stuff. So feel free to reach out. And if you'd like to be on the email list, feel free to message Fernando either privately or you can leave your email in the chat, and we will be happy to add you to the email list. Okay, so today's topic, again, well, I should say this first. Typically, the last meeting of the semester, especially in the spring when we're close to graduation, the philosophy club, we would usually host like a potluck little lunch. It was kind of fun, very informal. And, you know, we can't really do that due to the circumstances of this being distance. So we're going to continue on with the topic, and we decided to open it up to student suggestions for this one. And we got two suggestions that were similar, they were overlapping. So what the officers and I decided to do is merge them. Typically, I introduce the topic, but the students are here. Would y'all like to introduce the topic? And I guess I'll say what the title of the topic is. It's Art and or the Artist. So again, it comes down to the idea of ought we, can we separate works of art from the artists themselves? Is it the responsibility of a society to promote morality and therefore, you know, take to task certain artists who may have exhibited in their personal lives immoral behavior, but nonetheless have contributed to the general zeitgeist, culture? You know, is it possible to separate the two, or ought we not? Things along these lines. So yeah, I'll turn it over to the two students, Eva
Well,
and.
yeah, there you go. I was about to say yes, please mention them so the recording actually has it. So yes, the two students who are going to be introducing to this topic, thank you for your suggestion, by the way, is Eva and Osita. So feel free to take it out and you introduce the topic.
Yeah, I don't know if Athena, if you can talk at the moment. I know we're both at work. Um, but if you want to, because you had the idea first, technically. So if you want to do the introduction, I'll defer to you if you're able to talk.
Me? Oh,
No. Athena. Yeah.
oh, thank you for the clarification. I was like,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Maybe. Maybe not. Okay. Well, I'll introduce it then. Um. Yeah. Uh. So yeah. Like I said, Athena had the idea first, and I thought it was a really good idea, so I kind of just suggested it in my own way. But thinking about art, and we also did some work about cancel culture in the philosophy class, in the intro to ethics class. Um, you know, there's clearly, especially recently, um, it seems like every so often an artist will be canceled or uh, a problematic. They'll do something problematic socially, and all of a sudden the question will come up. Well, should those shows be on TV anymore? Thinking of like, oh, the Cosby Show, or should we listen to R. Kelly or Michael Jackson, or can we laugh at Louis C.K. anymore, or any artist, even sometimes when the artist is dead. Um, and is that fair? Is their art less poignant? Does it not still produce an aesthetic experience? Is it not still beautiful? Is Louis C.K. really not funny anymore, or whatever it is? Even if they are contemporarily bad people, colloquially, I hate to make a judgment call, even if they are like objectively bad. Um, so is that right? Can we separate the art from the artist and still enjoy the art while acknowledging their sometimes very severe moral failings? Um, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So it seems like I guess Orlando is the first one to intervene. So I mean, go ahead. I guess.
You can go first if you have
No,
something to say, Fernando. It's
just
all
say
right.
it. It's fine.
I kind of just want to answer the question directly here. I think when it comes to society as a standard, I don't think there's this we should. I don't think there should be this should. I think it should be dependent on the individual. Because we live in a market system where we can either support or not support something. And if there is a creation artist who's making certain revenue or monetary gain from an audience and you just don't give them an audience, then it's simple as that. They're just not going to have that. They're not going to have anything beneficial from that. So basically, it's your own individual moral choice. My issue is when you start to kind of take that to the political level and start to say, oh, no, we as a society as a whole need to decide something. I think that's when you start to infringe on freedom of speech. And so that's when I start to have an issue with it. But I think it's really dependent on the person. That's kind of how I see it.
Okay. But I'm not completely sure if I mean I understand what you're saying. I'm not completely sure if it goes the whole thing as Osita was trying to mention. Um, because I think like your point of view is mostly like it is an issue if it becomes politicized. Is that what you meant?
I feel like whenever you start to set like a precedent of censoring artists, that can
Mm-hmm.
make, a slippery slope. And once
Yeah.
you do it for one occasion, you'll start to do it for the other, and then it just gets worse from there.
Yeah. I mean, something that and before going into the chat, that the queue is already like I found at the pop in. Something that I always find fascinating about this regard is that, yeah, I think to some degree, artists are held more accountable of their actions than certain other entities that I'm not gonna name. But like sometimes we see politicians or certain like public figures that they get away with their actions that are considerably sometimes even more immoral than the artist one, and they still go on unpunished. Well, the artist, it could be something, I mean, that the person did like 20 years ago, and they still kind of like pay for it, which is still like kind of like, I'm not completely sure what the difference is between one and another. Um, because I mean, 20 years is arguably a lot. There could be a lot of to change, but it seems to like if it can hurt the industry in some level, they just dismiss them like very quick. But I mean, I guess we're gonna be tackling that today, so I'm just be happy to see what we're gonna say. And next one is Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Orlando, I like the point you made. And just to kind of, further contextualize this discussion topic, the monthly theme is art. And so we began by considering just what exactly is art. And that led us to questions like, well, what constitutes an artist? If art is merely, learning a technique and really refining and honing a technique and cultivating a skill that I suppose allows one to artistically express certain sentiments or certain ideas or values, is an artist maybe more general than we like to maybe sometimes recognize. Maybe we're all artists in that way. But I only bring that up because that's kind of the alternative to what I'm hearing already. This idea that, perhaps artists, they occupy a certain special stature, or at least traditionally they have, where the role of the artist would seem to be precisely to shed a light on society's mores, society's morals, just the cultural perspective itself, try to bring to light certain absurdities in it. And sometimes that meant testing the limitations of those very moral boundaries, societally acceptable, I suppose, moral perceptions of what is and is not allowed, even for things like artists. And yet some artists do seem capable of transcending that and being able to continue to create their art in spite of maybe defying certain societal moral perceptions, generally speaking. And so I guess here's what I wanted to throw out there, just given everything I said. To what extent does the individual, I guess we'll just say viewer, or depending on the form of art, of course, but the listener, whatever the case may be, what role do we play in, I suppose, evaluating the quality of a work of art? And because I think that's kind of where this question lies. I wonder if the quality is of a certain level, then exceptions will be made. And I think we've seen that. And so is that a good thing? Should more exceptions be made? Should fewer exceptions be made? What is the purpose of art anyway? Is it to educate us morally? If that's not the purpose of art, then should it still be held to those standards? Again, things like this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, no, that's wonderful points. And I mean, I don't know if George wants to talk about it a little bit further. Otherwise, I can expand a bit and then just connect.
I was going to reply to what Orlando said. So Ferdinando, if you have a comment about what Manzi said, go for
ahead. It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, Orlando, I liked your response. I think there's definitely some good and helpful things in that direction. It should really be an individual choice. Certainly no government should just be deciding, okay, Trotsky is canceled, so we're going to not pay attention to anything that he said or wrote or did or people he were friends with. They're all just gone. So I agree with you there. I'm wondering, though, if just punting it to the individual has sort of dodged the question here. So I guess my question for you is, if you as an individual, right, loved a certain work of art and you found it beautiful and it was inspiring to your humanity and so forth, and it turns out that the person who made it's like a dirt bag, how would you navigate that? Like, I think that's the heart of this question, right? Because what do you do if somebody who's terrible makes something beautiful? Do you throw out the work of art along with the artists, or like what? So what do you think? How would you navigate this as an individual?
Yeah, so I sort of gave that vague response just because my thing is people are different, To some, they'll see they can separate the artist from the art and say, well, you know what? I don't really care about the artist. I enjoy this song, or I enjoy this piece of work. And so therefore, I'm still going to continue to enjoy it. While there's other people who hold certain moral principles to say, well, no.
We have it back.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if somebody's actually like clicking on it, but I mean, if you are, please don't. Anyways, okay, but the thing is, should we then make the separation, or should we kind of like encourage people to evaluate art based on the person who is creating it? In my case, I mean, it's honestly like part of at least what I consider art is somebody being able to portray like a message. But the thing is like art is not just in like unilateral. For me, like it's part of like the sender and the receiver. And part of the beauty of the art is that the receiver like completes the whole process. So like on like for me it's kind of hard when people start like just like let's cancel all this stuff. I mean if it is not like one of those polemical things that can actually encourage people to like become serial killers, like it's weird, at least in my mind, to kind of like evaluate, because like, at the end of the day you're the one who is giving the meaning of that art to begin with, and at some point.
But you know what, Fernando, you kind of remind me of something. This is kind of like a variation of another kind of philosophical debate of like good and evil. You know, what makes good and evil, and like, is it the intention or is it like the events that follow, the consequences? And I say this because like, well, let's think about maybe a work of art or a song that they don't know anything about the artist. They listen to it. They're maybe depressed or going through emotional issues, and it helps them. You know, there's good in that. But then they later turns out that the artist is a scumbag. Should that be negated because of the artist? If that same feeling of of peace still comes to the person from listening to the song, should they just let go of the song completely?
Well, but that's exactly my point. Like, let's say that there was a song that helped you go through a lot. Like you was like it was the reason why you're still alive, and you have achieved like a lot because of that song. And then you hear that the author was like a piece of trash. I mean, the song still was helpful for you, regardless of that person was trash or not. But would you still kind of just remove that song from your history because the person who created it doesn't follow your what you believe is good or not, even though the song itself was helpful to you? Um, but okay, I see Osita is wanting to speak, so I would just circumvent to the queue, and like I mean we can go through there.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of like what Orlando said because it really is, kind of, I guess my view right now about art is it depends on how it makes you feel individually as a person. So if you still like the song or the show or the movie or the book or the whatever, knowing what you know about the artist, whatever. I truly believe that like it should just be your choice. I kind of lean away from censorship, and I'd rather just like let people decide, like let the quote unquote public marketplace of ideas or whatever sort of hash it out. I think, unless the person has like, you know, I guess what Orlando said, I guess, about like the political spectrum of this,
Mm-hmm.
in that like, what about someone like Alex Jones is like the quintessential, and you could, he's a political commentator. You could argue that he's an artist. He puts on a radio show. He's an entertainer or whatever. He, you know, um, so, you know, he should he be banned? I think if someone has broken a law, then the law will handle it. But and maybe this is stretching the topic too much, but um, is it okay for artists or public figures or entertainers to be like banned? I get if we're like, oh, we're socially canceling them, which means like you'll get like a side eye look, if someone catches you like enjoying or watching them because they're supposed to be quote unquote canceled. But what if they're like just actually banned from Twitter, Facebook, you know, everything pretty much. Is that okay? Do we want that as a society? Is that a free society, or should we let people make the choice about what they want to watch? Um, I guess that's kind of my question. And I mean, I guess one more thing is like, no one's perfect, right? So if you have an artist, if you dig deeply enough, you're gonna find something. It just depends on if what they do is objectionable to you or not. But no one's gonna be perfect. So I mean, that's why you never want to meet your heroes, because they're gonna wind up being, you know, a jerk or something like that. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's a good
I think
point.
I'll be here.
No, that we already know. Like this is the thing, Nancy. Like you have to be someone's hero first, and yeah, that bridge is burned already. But I mean, regardless of, one of the aspects that I do take from what you're saying, Osita, is the whole thing of censorship, and which it connect with what Orlando was saying. Like there's some point that if you get censored, like by something like it could be like political driven, sometimes the one who is doing the work could be doing a good job, but they use a specific like flaw of the other person to demoralize the message that could be actually good for, or I mean, against the wrong society or a wrong government in this case. Sorry. So like I see where you're coming. It could be used like to diminish the potential that some artists could have in society. And I remember that there has been a couple of, I don't remember the topic, but I know I saw it in philosophy, which is like, would that sacrifice be worthy of exploring or something like that? I'm not using the proper term right now, but it's around those lines. Well, Eva, you were the one who created this topic, it seems, so I'm just gonna let you take over.
Oh my gosh, awesome. Sorry about earlier. I don't know why it just did not let me press the like unmute. And I was like, whatever, irrelevant. I'm here now. So I just wanted to, when I proposed it, I just did like a essay in Manzi's ethics class on cancel culture, and then we did a group project on it, and it has been on my mind for a while, and it feels like it's becoming more and more like in your face, and yet people are not. Like I was surprised when Manzi said that we were like, my group was one of the more critical ones, and that most were not necessarily, and that really shocked me, because I was hoping, like, because with the people that I was working with, they seemed to be like a little more critical of just outright censorship is what it ends up being. Like, I understand, of course, the need to whatever keep pornography and bestiality out of, you know, the people's hands, whatever, to be like extreme as possible. But these same platforms aren't really doing that. They're literally allowing child pornography and bestiality, you know, no problem. But when it's these dissenting comedians or artists, and that was one thing that when I was talking with, or whatever, when we were talking with Manzi the other day, that when you pointed out that the thing that a lot of these people had in common was that they were artists, and that, I mean, I also am kind of the mind that everybody is an artist, whether or not necessarily they mean it, if their work could be interpreted that way. Like Osita said about Alex Jones, he even defended himself in court, saying that he was an entertainer, that this was an entertainment show. So, like, even if he is saying it's news, I mean, so did Jon Stewart, and it was a great news show, but it was also a comedian show, and, you know, a comedian show, a comic show, whatever. But the other thing that I wanted to go back on, like, my biggest thing was just, like, can you, like, I mean, in general, there's this idea that we can't ethically consume at all in the environment that we live in. So is there even a point to trying to, you know, like say, I'm not going to read Harry Potter, watch Harry Potter, buy Harry Potter because I believe J.K. Rowling is transphobic. Does that really make anything better? Or this is my, you know, posit, I guess, or what I believe would be the better approach to cancellation, like OC says, kind of is, let the markets control. So I'm going to pirate her shit. I am not going to like share stuff from her website. Of course, I'm not actually going to pirate anything. I'm not doing anything illegal whatsoever. I'm just saying, Yeah, so that's what I say. Like, as an alternative to like exiling people or just punishing people, because it is going beyond just like deplatforming. Now it's like people can't use PayPal and they can't go to Chase Bank and they can't get AT&T phones, and it starts to go like, wow, like how much of this are things that we take for granted, but are really, how is this really making the world freer or better, more morally progressive? So yeah, I think that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for your beautiful insight. And Orlando is just making fun of people as usual. He has no respect. We should cancel Orlando here and there. Just saying. Okay, so Mansi, you're next.
Yeah, thank
Oh, Mansi, you're muted. I think it was Orlando actually, but just saying.
I think right.
No, I didn't
Yes.
do it this time. I swear I didn't. Last time I did mute Marcus, but not this time. No.
Okay.
I will not be held down. No, yeah, thank you for those contributions. They're very compelling thoughts, and I was going to sort of develop the same trajectory of thought there, but now I'm going to pull back and maybe try to play the devil's advocate. It seems to me like we're on most of the statements I've heard seem to be on the following page. It's good to have morality in society, and moral judgments, moral evaluations in general are a positive thing. They are what allow society to function. So having said that, here's where the difficulty, at least for me, seems to come into play. These artists, some of them are really good at their art. Some of them they really know how to make a film. They really know how to tell a joke or do a sketch comedy thing or whatever. And the issue might be this, that if they're joking or making fun of, or in an entertaining way, satirizing, or if they're creating songs about it where certain quote unquote immoral forms of behavior are celebrated, are lauded, and it's in a way where the art is very appealing, then maybe that has the result, perhaps unintended result, of encouraging this kind of immoral behavior because it becomes associated with satisfying forms of art. And so it's not so much that the artist should be quote unquote canceled for their intentions, or because again, that's always a question. We don't know anyone's true intentions, but it's more a matter of, well, look, this will be the impact on society. It's almost like, the art is too good. And so the source of this art that seems to be, again, presenting this sort of immoral behavior in a way that is, again, appealing, something along these lines. Think like The Sopranos or something like that. This could have a detrimental impact on society, whether, again, anybody intended it to or not. And so for that reason alone, should we promote censorship?
I see. I do want to add something, because at the end of the day, and I think there has been an overall message of what we have been discussing this month. Like at the end of the day, we are the one who evaluate art. So if we consider an art to be good, like society kind of like society is kind of like being represented there. I don't know if that makes sense. Like if we as a society agree that that art is good, and we understand that there is some baggage in it, it means that it is a reflection of how societies are working right now. To some degree, I feel like, yeah, if we censor it, it kind of like it isn't an effort to change. The problem I see is that sometimes, like the people who has that power is they're not necessarily interested in making the most moral decisions. That's the thing. So like people sometimes can say like, hey, you know what? We think that this is good thing for us to have, but the one making the decision, I mean, you know what? That's not my beneficial. So I just like clot. So if we cannot control really, and we cannot have a decent assessment of like what is proper to censor, it becomes more difficult to assess, at least in my opinion. I do think that there are some things that we should censor, but it's hard to tell really like what that really is, at least in my opinion. And George, you're next.
Yeah, I was just gonna say something kind of along those same lines too. I feel like a lot of the conversation we've been having so far is focused on the individual, right? Should the individual, should you decide whether or not to watch something or consume some media if the artist, and then if a bunch of individuals do that, then the free market society, right, can sort of upvote or downvote certain artists or certain works of art, and then that's how it works out. But there's another side to that equation. It's not just individuals consuming A versus B. A lot of what we see, a lot of what comes in front of us is because of the publishing company, right? So in the case of television works or Netflix, has a lot of control in what ends up in front of a lot of people. So it's not enough to just say, oh, the networks publish whatever and let the individuals sort it out, because I think the networks have a responsibility to maybe promote good works of art and maybe not promote bad works of art. And you know, say I'm an idealist or whatever, but I think they have a responsibility beyond just do what is most profitable or do what you think is most profitable. I think that would be a shame that human society would just get reduced down to money like that. So let me try to put some flesh on this here. So like the Cosby Show, right? Great work of art, important message. Cosby's a creep. So obviously they didn't know about that back then, but today the network has to choose. If we show the Cosby Show, right, are we profiting from a guy being a creep? Are we giving a creep a platform to spread his message? Should we do that? Is the creep going to continue to profit if we show their stuff? But here's the thing, it's not just do we show it or not, because there's an opportunity cost. If they show it, they're also not showing somebody else's art. Okay, so you can't just say, oh, we're going to have it all. You have to cancel the Cosby Show and put something in its place, or you keep the Cosby Show. So it's not as simple as just show everything and let the market decide. The guy who's got the network has to put something in his primetime slot, his or her primetime slot, and that's either going to be the Cosby Show or they're going to look for something else. And I think there's something more to it besides just what's going to make us the most money. Osita says, who decides what is good or bad art? Yeah, great question. I'm not even trying to get into that. It's just going to say, yes, that's a good choice. Put something else that gives somebody better a platform in its spot. I hope that huge rant made sense. It's just, this is complicated. I don't know. This is a good topic this week because I honestly don't know with some of this stuff.
Yeah, you brought something that I was thinking, which is the whole thing of the marketability of the person who is doing the bad action. Because for me that was exactly it. It's like, you know, like part of the reason why sometimes it's trying to be censored is because by not doing so, the perpetrator is still receiving incomes to be sustainable to just do whatever, you know. So there is that. I do understand. It's the same question as Osita. Like it's hard for us to really say, you know what, I am morally high enough to say this is good and this is bad. Because at the end of the day, like it's hard for us to just judge our like another peer. I would like to think that we shouldn't be thinking of ourselves as better morally speaking than anybody, because the moment that you feel that confident, you probably should be checking on you like a little bit. Just saying. But I mean, it is a tough question, but I see what you're saying. Like, it makes sense if that is the reason. to give time or to give opportunity to other artists to show more their message to see if it goes the right direction. But again, who is making those decisions? Um, like not because someone is new means that that person is better, morally speaking. It's just someone that we don't completely knew and we just give them a chance. But I think Eva is next. I, I think Eva is next. Yes.
So yeah, I totally get what you guys are saying as far as like you don't want to put it on the individual, and yet at the same time, personally, I definitely don't feel comfortable putting it on these platforms or now giving them the rights to like publishing, because who are these people? You know, like exactly like you're saying, right now that's already happening. We already live in that world where they're pushing certain stories, certain art. That's already happening. You know, whatever is going to be most profitable. And instead of it being like an actual fair market, like, I don't mean like the capitalistic market. I mean like, and of course there are capitalistic aspects of it, but I just mean like the general like things that the consumption of like intellectual materials, we'll call them, like any kind of creative art. I don't know what to call it. So like if we choose to consume that, not the things that the publishers are telling us or pushing, which is actively like what I guess the YouTube CEO recently said, that it's just a fact that they're going to push the things that are more popular, and they decide the things that are more popular. So again, it all goes back to who are these people? Do we want it to be the government? I mean, because I'm like, yeah, I like the idea of a body of people doing it, but do I trust the government? I don't know, and I don't know if I trust some random bureaucrats in a tech company, but I know that generally speaking, people can make the best decision for themselves. And if we do expose them to as many things as possible without this filter of an algorithm that says, well, you like X, Y, and Z, you will like A, B, and C, you know, like it just reinforces and develops this like echo chamber. So that's why I like the idea of it being more individualistic. Like, even though I don't think we do or can with the rigid structure of the way our media is, I don't think it's currently possible. But I think that I'm all about the people power, right? So I think if we just like refuse to consume, you know, Cosby, things that give Cosby money, if we just say, okay, we're going to do Hulu, but Hulu, you can't pay Cosby. And like, I just feel like there are ways to do this without it being like so authoritarian. Like, I understand the need to like not promote good or, you know, or whatever bad, like, but then I don't know. It's just I trust somebody more individually than I do a collective group of people, unless that collective group is actually representative, you know. But yeah, so that's all I have to add for now. Oh, well, I was gonna say the same thing with the Cosby thing. It's just like deleting people from media, like deleting Trump from the Home Alone movies, or, you know, how far are we gonna go? Like, what is this all about? What is this actually doing? How does that make January 6th not happen? Or like, how does this prevent people from? I don't know. I don't think that has anything to do with it, and that's why I think it's more about like y'all were saying, just political kind of retaliation, and getting rid of artists and comedians and stuff just makes it so much easier to quell dissent, because then any expression of artwork is dissent, you know? But
Yeah, and I mean, and you also bring this up, like sometimes maybe the people who are making the decision of censorship or like end contract with somebody could be just to either make themselves look better or, yeah, like you said, to distract of something else that is happening. It's kind of like maybe they're like, "Oh, you know, this is happening, and boom, you throw this out, and it's like the attention gets diverted, and this is not completely addressed. So there are many of things that can be happening. So I see what you're saying. Asita, you're next.
Yeah, a few things. Really quick, what Athena said about the YouTube CEO, she actually didn't say more pop. They would push more popular content. She said more authoritative content with regard to like you know, podcasts, whether they be conservative or liberal or progressive podcasters, or just smaller independent news shows would get less love from the YouTube algorithm than CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, these quote unquote authoritative sources, which is interesting. Uh, uh, but
Expert.
one, yeah, experts and officials only. And so, um, uh, uh, one thing that, well, okay, I'll go in order. So, the question that Professor Manti posed, sort of like, you know, what about art that glorifies negativity, I guess? Um, and it's like, well, first of all, I'll say is like, if watching Sopranos is wrong, I don't want to be right. It's like top three, maybe like greatest TV show ever. So I'll just say that first of all. But I'll say, I think that's, again, I'll go back to like, we do, if, and maybe not all the laws are perfect, but we have like, decency and morality laws. We have laws against inciting violence and things like that. I think that if someone someone releases an album where every track is like, very specific about violence they should cause, or like directions on how to do it, and very, very blatantly insightful, then that's illegal, and that person will be prosecuted. The album will be taken off the shelves because it's illegal speech, and that person will probably be in prison, and they won't even be able. They'll be canceled by the legal system, and I think that's how it should work. Personally, I think if that's why we have to ID you before you can see a rated R movie. That's why you have to pay for HBO, things like that. I think that, yeah, there should be safeguards from like really, let's call it dangerous art, potentially dangerous art. But unless it breaks a law, and then, you could argue that we need better laws, or we need, or whatever. But unless it breaks a law, I'm slow to say that it should be memory hold and deleted from like, yeah, deleted from everything. Um, Personally, um, and on one hand, I actually agree with him because, like, personally, I won't go into it, but as a black male growing up in America, I personally have my own issues with like with the genre of like gangster rap. And I think it's on a whole, like, it's become like a negative thing for the black community. That's just my personal belief. I think originally it was a way for like young poets to sort of get a message out. And I think right now it's transformed into something that's not helpful. Again, that's just my personal belief. But I don't think that it shouldn't be allowed, because it just doesn't feel right. I think that, you have parents in the home, there should be, that is sort of like the function of parents, is to like sort of police I know it's getting harder in the digital age, but there can be adults who just want this music to work out to, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're not going to become a gangster or whatever. It's just, so I'm not sure if it should be not allowed in a society, but yeah, I guess that was kind of, I guess, yeah, one more thing was uh I really did like George's example of like the Cosby Show, of like his point of like, if you promote one piece of art uh that might be thought of as like negative or coming from a negative source, that slot is not being taken by a more positive, I guess, piece of art or artist. And that's a really good point. Um, and so we can get into like promoting. Like, I think Athena said, it's like, okay, you could have the Cosby Show on Hulu or whatever, but like, don't promote it. Don't like put it up on the front page. Just like bury it in the back. Don't like give it any algorithm love. And that's a way to like still sort of like walk that line. Although I do still think like an artist should be paid for their art, even if they're terrible. Like, if Cosby should still get residuals for the Cosby Show. It's his art. He did it. I'm sort of against that whole like that sort of punishment of like taking away the work that you did, taking away the money that you should get for the work that you did. You still did the work, but that's me. But yeah, I think that's kind of it right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I also have a question based on what you said, and this is not just for you, it's for everyone. Because I mean, based on my experience, I don't necessarily think that is that beneficial to just cancel it, like just to like hide it on the ground like it doesn't exist. Because if you pretend it doesn't exist, people don't learn from it. Like it happened many times. Like for example, without going too much into explicits, normally the countries who are less educated when it comes to like sexuality matters are the ones who have more sexuality issues than the ones who are actually like, exposed, and they kind of like put like in front and say like, listen, this is this, and this is what we think, like this is, you know, and they're kind of like more educated and they kind of like are more aware of that, so they are more prepared to start like asking themselves like, should this be good, should this be bad? So if the whole action that one is proposing is just let's cancel it, let's pretend it doesn't exist, and that way it's not going to affect like people, I think it's an easy fix for a very difficult like situation. And I think that, I mean, it's just a question like, would that really be the best course of action? Could we like maybe have a different way to approach this? Because if we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist, like, okay, we're not supporting this artist, but that, like, not everyone is an artist who is doing this. Like some people, they're just regular people, just like ourselves. They're just doing it, doing it, doing it. So it's like you're actually, to some degree, giving less attention to an issue that we need to tackle just by just censoring and I'm a good person now. I'm a good person. I did my deed.
That
So
actually,
like,
if I could, oh sorry,
mhm.
I don't know.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, to respond to that, you just reminded me of I wanted make, um, but it's more political. But I agree when you try to, for instance, all the people that who I guess you would call alt-right or whatever, if you kick them off of YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, they're just going to go somewhere else. It's not going to go away. You know, the best way to combat something that you think might be problematic is to discuss it and to have like very open discourse about it so it can be argued down publicly. You know, if you kick all neo-Nazis off of Twitter or whatever, they're just going to concentrate in like 8kun or 8chan or wherever they go, wherever they go. They're going to concentrate and they're going to be in an echo chamber, and they'll slowly draw in more and more people, and there'll be no one there to combat that because everyone there is of one mind. If you want to combat that, let them all in to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and they'll be shouted down, and there'll be, you know, response videos and debates and things like this to really hash this problem out. And I think I agree that I don't think that that's an effective way to combat any negative ideas. But is it the best effect in the sunlight? I think bring it out into the open and discuss it openly. And then we as, you know, we can decide, we can kind of move this dialogue along as a society. But when you just put them in a corner, like the evil concentrates and it gets stronger and more entrenched. And I think that's sort of with everything. You can't drive anything underground. You know, they tried to do a punk or with hippies and all of this stuff. It doesn't work. You know, it just creates a more concentrated counterculture. That's going to be a problem. You know, a problem maybe. I don't know if you call it a problem. I kind of like hippies, but you know what I mean. But yeah.
Okay. So then now let's go back into the queue. We have Nancy saying, if good art glamorized immoral behavior, would that be considered good, bad art? Ought such art be moderated? And then we have Orlando. So Orlando, you're up.
I kind of did this a long time ago, so I kind of forgot some of my points there, but I'll try my best. I think some of it I was like responding to George. When it comes to companies, I agree. I wish things were ideal, but I think for the most part, they operate under profit. A lot of the time they're at the mercy of their stockholders. So even when you're thinking about, oh, well, I would like them to morally appeal to the audience. When they morally appeal to an audience, it's because they want the audience to stay with them. They want to keep the audience's attention. So a lot of the time when they're doing these things for moral reasons, it really seems like disingenuous, and it seems like it isn't for the real purpose of what they say. Also, since you were speaking about publishing, I think a lot of the time these producers, not producers, what am I thinking of? Publishers, a lot of the time they're actually making a lot more money than the artists themselves. So this whole ideal of, well, we're still supporting the artist. Well, how much are we really supporting the artist? Because a lot of the time, music and in industry in general, you see a lot of these artists go broke. You see them having to work different jobs and whatnot. Why? Because they did not have good deals to begin with. So it's not always as simple as, oh, I'm supporting the artist directly. It's not always the case. Um, but going beyond that, I have an issue also with the YouTube algorithm you guys kind of brought up. Um, who do you think they're going to pick as the authoritative news source? CNN and Fox. Have you guys watched CNN and Fox? Have you guys watched their talk show hosts? Have you
I
seen
rather
how
not.
biased they really, really are, like really badly? Like if you actually watch the talk show hosts on both of those sides and see how they demonize the other side, you realize a lot of these shows are actually almost as bad as a lot of the YouTube podcast people. So I have an issue with independent media being, silenced in a way where basically, oh, I'm going to choose this authoritative figure over this person who doesn't know anything. Well, is that necessarily what you're doing, or are you creating a certain media presence that people can only be exposed to? Because that's really what it seems like you're doing. If you think about before YouTube, what did you really have for news? You only had like what, TV, maybe news articles by corporations that owned a lot of these news corporations. So you really only had a limited choice. So you only had a limited window to look at these companies. And so with the YouTube, it was sort of this new thing where, oh, I can go to independent media sources. I can look at them. I can go to them to see a different side of the story. But now YouTube is sort of counteracting that, saying, well, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're gonna, if you really want to look for it, you're gonna have to search for it. So that in and of itself, I think is a very bad thing. And beyond that, in terms of like the individual, I think if you're the person who morally wants to subjugate certain artists, you should find it upon yourself to look for the artists that you want to support. You should be the person, despite the publications, despite streaming stuff on Netflix. Guess what? There's a lot of independent sources you can go to on your own accord. So I don't think it's as much on the publications, because at the end of the day, the way we're talking about this, it's sort of we're operating on this out of sight, out of mind kind of mentality. How many of the people that we currently support now aren't bad people? They're not bad people because we don't know about that. They just haven't come to light. And so should we really just operate on this, oh, well, we figured them out, so now we have to hate them? Should we really operate like that? Is that really the way we should think? I just don't, I have an issue with that. I don't think so. But that's where I'll stop.
Yeah, I guess they pay the price of not being good enough in hiding it. They should have trained in more that capability. I mean, but yeah, like I guess there is a saying in Spanish, ojos que no ven, corazón que no siente, which I think it translates to like, um, though that the eye cannot see, the heart won't feel it. So like I think like we as a society, we are aware that nobody's perfect. We're aware that everyone has their skeletons in the closet. But since we don't see it, we can pretend that it's not there. But once it is exposed, people kind of like have to like really just kind of like deal with it. It's kind of like, oh, now it's exposed. Oh, geez, like which band am I in? So it's like, I guess I don't know. It does speaks on the whole aspect that people maybe by knowing they like society can expect you to choose like which side you're on. I don't know. that makes some sort of sense. But I mean, I hear you, Orlando. I agree with you. Like we like many people that would support they still bad people, or maybe they're not that bad people, but they all have some degree of badness in them. So well, I'm gonna read Osita's thought. So Osita said, "Who decides what is good or bad art?" And sadly, unless they are made to through legislation, publishers have no more responsibility than to make as much money as possible for shareholders. Really good point about the Cosby Show. That's what I said. Oh, and now is Luca here? Luca, you're next.
No, sadly, Professor Ulrich had to run, but he left a few comments in the chat.
Oh, okay. So he said this. Okay, well, and before going to Mansi, I'm gonna read a little bit more of the chat. Eva, you said the best way to combat bad speech is better speech. Interesting. Hopefully the better speech is not censored. But I guess yes. Then we have Luca that yeah, he was saying that he had to go. Thank you for another great week of conversation. What can I say? That's how we roll. And then he said, I appreciate all your openness and a great semester discussion. He didn't say anything. All right, so then Mansi, if the commercialization of morality becomes the driving force behind socially acceptable art, how would that limit the scope of artistic expression, and how might such measure be convincingly justified? And then Daniel say, out of sight, out of mind. Oh, okay, I'm assuming this like the translation to what I was saying. Okay, Mansi, you're next, and then is George.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I put it out there in the chat. So again, I love what I'm hearing. I mean, this is a really, really fantastic and fascinating discussion, especially with the plurality of perspectives on this, because it's not an easy, and you know, George brought this out earlier, it's not an easy topic to dissect. It's very intricate, it's very complicated. There are a lot of strands that are kind of tied together when trying to, again, disentangle, you know, where does art begin and the artist end? And, you know, where does the culpability of everybody involved in, I guess, comprising the artistic experience come into play? So, and to what degree? So I guess I'll put it out there. I'll rephrase what I said in the chat in a different way. If the standard of what constitutes good art becomes beholden to the moral, the generally acceptable moral practices of a society, then does that inherently limit the possibilities of what quote unquote art in that society is capable of? And here's like a little follow-up. In what ways, or in what way, depending, does art, I suppose, reflect the advancement of a society? And again, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. So when I say advancement, I mean, well, consider looking back into the past historically. Considering, again, different arts and artistic expressions and artistic trends that occurred throughout history in different societies, and the nature of those societies that spawn certain works of art, certain forms of art. What might that do to a society if art is somehow suppressed for any sake? Because here's ultimately what I'm driving at. And you know, I believe that Athena and Asita spoke on this in Orlando as well. The idea of art itself, the purpose, the function of art itself in a society could very well be to present us with concrete, viscerally pleasing versions of life in a moral context. And it doesn't have to be overtly or explicitly so, but whenever art is supposedly expressing something about the human condition, there's always inherently an ethical or moral quality to that. And so perhaps we could learn morally beneficial, or we'll just say perhaps we can learn moral lessons from artistic expressions of immoral behavior. And so perhaps for that reason, if we can cultivate a mindfulness of not necessarily interpreting works of art strictly literally, but understanding there's a figurative, poetic dimension to them, perhaps then we could justifiably say, well, there is room for this kind of art in society, with the understanding that it's teaching us not just what not to do, but it's delivering to us in a very visceral fashion the whys of what not to do. In a way, again, that's more immediately understandable because you're watching individual humans in a narrative, or works of art, like a single work of art. Okay. Yeah. Am I on mute?
Yes, absolutely. And we didn't hear a single thing. We just let you go. We were having our own conversation here. Okay, George, you're next. And then Osita.
I was going to respond to what Manzi put in the chat, but I see Osita says one last thing, which makes me think that he wanted to add something to the earlier conversation. So I wanted to give him an opportunity to do that if he thought that would be better.
I think he was just trying to talk one more time before the meeting ends. But I don't know.
No,
He's saying,
he says.
Go ahead.
So Jeff just said like a lot, and there's a lot there to unpack. When he first put that thing in the chat, I was like, yeah, I could totally see how if he said the commercialization of morality, and I took that to mean that the publishers would publish things that they think are moral, like Orlando was saying, but they're not doing it because they actually want to promote goodness. They're doing it to make money in this very like disingenuous way. How would that limit the scope of artistic expression? Well, all of a sudden you've got acceptable art that is profitable and according to the narrative that we want to push because it's profitable, and we've got everything else, and that's bad. I agree with what Jeff was saying, where even art that depicts bad things has value in constructing morality. So limiting art to what we've already determined is good or bad can be dangerous. It's almost like the you're putting the cart before the horse. Let art be this like wild, untamed thing where we can kind of explore and engage with ideas in different ways, and then sort out which ideas are good and which ones should be rejected, as opposed to deciding in advance which ideas are okay and then making sure the art fits rubber stamp into that mold, and only promoting that art to make sure we've got ourselves a nice sealed echo chamber where everybody can agree and conform and all the outsiders are done away with. That seems spooky to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do want to uphold the idea that art should be about promoting the best of us, the goodness. So my mind, I think those things fight with each other to a certain extent. I haven't got it figured out. So.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I got.
All right. So before Osita goes, I see Orlando agree with you, and also I see that Jesus is just excusing himself. Like somehow the power went out. So no, it's fine. It's good to have you here, but it's fine. All right. So go ahead, Osita.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, offer a rebuttal to, or maybe it's an agreement, actually, to sort of the phrase that was repeated, basically out of sight, out of mind, or I can't remember what you said. What the eyes cannot see, the heart cannot feel. So I would say, I guess I'm using that as a rebuttal. That's right, to what Orlando suggested, and that I agree with him with what he said. Is like, if you really want to seek something out, you can find it. You don't have to just watch cable news for your news. You can go find someone else. You don't just have to listen to the music that's on the radio or on MTV. Is MTV still a thing? You could just find there are other ways to find good music, good this or good that, but it's much harder. And I'm sort of going back to the whole, I guess I'm harping on like the YouTube algorithm issues, or like people getting kicked off of Twitter or Facebook, because these things, even though there's not just one YouTube or there's not just one Twitter, there you can go to Vimeo or other things like that. YouTube it essentially has a functional monopoly on like the video, the small personal video market. Twitter has a functional doggy on whatever Twitter is, and these things like that. And like my example is like Trump. Trump was kicked off of Facebook and Twitter, and people will still talk about him just because he's a ratings draw, but like no one really knows his day-to-day thoughts anymore. And if you really want to know, you can seek it out. I mean, even before he just released this new thing that he did, he was releasing statements, he was doing interviews, this and that. Like if you really wanted to go know what Trump was thinking, you could go find it. But it's not as widely instantly known as it would be if you still had a Twitter and a Facebook. You wouldn't have the reach, you wouldn't have the power and ability. And I mean, honestly, it feels like a lot of people aren't thinking about him as much anymore, just because he's not in what I would consider to be, the public town square, which is like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. These things are things that, and this is the big argument. I mean, this is getting political, but I think these things should be like protected areas of like free expression, unless it's illegal, of course. But the last thing I wanted to say was like, I feel like I have, since this whole thing started with like a question, my personal take on this is that I try my best to separate the art from the artist. I personally, I think, I mean, as someone mentioned, no one's perfect. Everything that you consume or enjoy, if you were to have omniscient knowledge of everything, you would know that, I mean, everyone has a skeleton in their closet. You're going to find something about everyone that you enjoy, whose work you enjoy consuming. They're going to have something that's going to be problematic. And so unless you just like don't consume any art, I don't even know how that's possible. You just kind of have to, learn to take the good and leave the bad. And if they're just like, a despicable person, then yeah, sure, don't promote the person or whatever, but you can still appreciate the art. I feel like that's my personal take on it to the question, but I did want to get everyone else's. Yeah.
I mean, it also goes back to the whole hypocrisy. Like like oneself also is full of flaws. So you're looking into somebody else and not just kind of like, I dismissed you. It's kind of like, well, have you seen on yourself? But I mean, yeah.
No, exactly. It's no one is perfect. Anyway, I could quote all these different things of like, look to your own sins before you, look at someone else. But yeah, and I guess to answer, I don't know if I could actually answer Professor Manz's question. I mean, first of all, I think that moral restrictions on art make for like pretty crappy art. I think that like any hindrances on free expression, right, isn't gonna be usually doesn't make it better. But there was, I guess, like the question, and this is a whole nother topic of like commercialization of morality. And so, I think Fernando, you mentioned something like this, where like a lot of these companies or publishers or whatever might quote unquote cancel someone or whatever. You see like, oh, like like Amazon or something, they won't sell whatever Trump t-shirts or whatever, you know, how they'll always do something like that to sort of like get brownie points by canceling something or someone from like, you know, society. But I think as Fernando mentioned, it's like, it's just a way to like obfuscate like the really like their dirty dealings of like, oh, also we're not paying any taxes, or oh, also like, you know, it's a token, it's a token gesture. I think a lot of times, I think it's an easy way to get social recognition without actually doing any hard work, any hard like social change or social any good social change that like, you know, these huge companies have the capacity to do. I think a lot of this is just like very just token fake sort of brownie points personally. But yeah, but promoting good art is I think a good thing. I agree with George. I think it's good if we promote good art. I don't see how that helps. Like yeah, governments have done that. They've promoted classical art or I know Russia was really famous like when they were like climbing out of the Middle Ages or in like in the Renaissance, they're like at the tail end of that. And the government made it like a concerted effort to like, we're gonna make sure a lot of people can like play classical music, and we're going to not modernize our society, but like educate our society. And I think that that's a good thing. To promote good things is, I think, is good. I think it should be morally required of governments, but that's all I had to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so the cultivation of certain sensibilities of taste and aesthetics, yeah, no, I hear you. And listen, I'm certainly sympathetic to what you're saying. It's just important to keep in mind that that requires a great deal of trust in the autonomy of the individual to be able to make those discrepancies, to be able to differentiate between figurative performance art versus, I suppose, something that's giving you advice or guidance in the form of art. It could be the case that not everybody's up to the task of making that, again, that distinction. And so to eliminate the possibility of risk, we can either limit the scope of art itself, or again, we can, as you're saying, just if you're the authority involved here, we can simply entrust every individual consumer, every individual citizen with the autonomy and the, I mean, we'll just say intellect to be able to distinguish between entertainment and something that is, I guess, pushing a sort of code or moral behavior, or just behavior in general. So yeah, so I appreciate that contribution. Thank you very much. And to your point about to my comment in the chat with the commercialization of morality, and George touched upon this as well. Look, frankly, I guess you could boil it down, if you want to be reductive, to two ways of looking at it. Either the powers that be are able to produce the social mechanisms that allow for something like, in this case, morality, to become a source of, again, profit. And so one way to do that might be to, you know, allow morality to play a role in art and entertainment, like a very direct, very influential role, for the sake of, again, selfish gain. Or the other way to look at it would be this: the powers that be are moral, and this is a good thing. Now those who are, you know, capable of producing all different forms of art and financing it and all that stuff, individuals of all different mediums, or again, groups, whatever the case may be, art collectives, now they're able to say, hey, this is fantastic. This is what we've been waiting for. We can merge art with morality in this beautiful synthesis that can only be beneficial to society. Again, these are the two extremes. I'm painting with a broad brush here, but that might be one way to sort of, you know, consider alternatives for that topic, which, and I agree, that's probably a whole separate topic. But all right, yeah, we're already over time by like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So I
I
guess
mean,
I was gonna say
it's
something,
normal.
Nancy. You know, you try to cut me off, try to censor me.
never.
That's our mission today. Like,
If I'm
we
gonna
are just
censor you, Manzi, I'm gonna cut your mic. All right, how about that?
I mean, I censored you last week, but that was it.
There you go. Anyways, no, I just wanted to add to something. I mean, I think we're kind of arguing against sort of this commercialization of art. You know, I agree completely, and I think this. I'm going to just be a little bit pessimistic here, but I think the reality of it is, when it comes to mainstream art, is that's exactly what we live in today. It is commercialized. A lot of the time, you know, it's profit before the artist. But here's the thing: even within that, we still have what scholarly organizations that exist. We still have independent organizations that exist. So I think even within that, we need, when we do finally find these mediums that are so great to us and that really reflect what George describes as the best of humanity, I think we should give them support, seek to give them support, and make sure that you're you know, if you can give any kind of monetary contributions. A lot of the time these places need that, they rely on that. Like, for an example, like, I think, is it KDXT? That's like an independent radio source that still exists today, just literally in your car, and they are completely dependent on donations. And so a lot of the time that still exists, and it's completely relying on us as consumers. So I think if you take anything away, I think you should take that away.
and that is why we need to censor Orlando. Just kidding, just kidding. Thank you for your contribution as always. Okay, so there is nothing more in the queue. So basically that's about it for today. If you want to say something else, talk now or whatever, hold your peace. Again, this is the yes, go ahead, man.
Just to respond quickly to Orlando, I like that point. I appreciate it. And again, if you look at something like Patreon, I think that's another example of what you're getting at, where you can have, there seem to be these platforms for individual artists who are able to do their thing, quote unquote, in a way where perhaps because they're behind a paywall, they're a bit outside the arm's grasp of what might be, I suppose, easily cancelable or something along these lines. So don't get me wrong. I agree. I think that, you know, there will always be, and somebody else earlier made the point about countercultures. I believe it was Osita, but there will be these sort of alcoves to continue it. But the question again becomes whether or not that's a good thing, a bad thing, a neutral thing. I mean, that's the whole question, especially when you consider that those kinds of platforms generate income, taxable income. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Osita was asking for the radio station again, which I think between on Eva and Orlando they figured it out. And well, George would like to read the whole entire dictionary. So go ahead. Yeah, let's do just that.
Aardvark. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Okay, so yes, again, and you can correct me, Nancy, if I'm wrong in this. Yeah, we are going to continue having our meetings during the summer. Again, same time, same day, same channel, all that stuff. However, remember that we're still going to need officers for the next academic year. So if you're interested in running for position for the philosophy club, as you see, it's very easy. Just let us know. We're going to be opening a form for you to apply. It's just you wanting to do the job, and the rest will take care of it. Of course, we're going to meet with you and kind of like do some sort of interview, whatever, something small, nothing that different of what you have been doing during this academic year. So then after kind of like mentoring you during the summer, you can start like having your own meetings of philosophy that start in the fall. So yeah, that's basically the announcement that I was giving. Beside that, if you want to see how famous you are on YouTube, please do so. We have all videos there. We also have all their social media. We have memes, we have everything. So just check those out. And I don't know if I'm missing something.
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you to everybody who came out today for the final meeting, and as well as thank you for a great couple semesters. This academic year was very, challenging in its own ways, but I applaud each of the officers for stepping up and really making this happen. Without them, there wouldn't be a philosophy club, so I do appreciate their efforts. It does not go unnoticed. And I don't know if people realize this. Ferdinando is a twin, and the only difference is that his twin doesn't have a mustache. So I'd like to thank our guest host for today, Ferdinando's twin, who stepped in for Ferdinando. He did a great job, pal. He did a great job.
Yeah, I would ask him, but thank you. I need to continue the tradition. Osita said LOL, so I have to say LOL. LOL. And Jay, according to Eva. Yes, thank you so much for those who are saying that we're great officers. And again, we will be sending more information about becoming an officer in an email. LOL, Eva.
Oh, and I will.
Mhm.
We don't have a topic schedule for the summer.
Oh, we do
So
not.
yeah, so I mean, if anybody has any ideas for topics, they don't necessarily have to fit a particular theme. Just anything y'all would like to talk about, because there aren't that many students enrolled in summer classes, so our meetings tend to be a little bit smaller than usual. So we sometimes tend to dive a bit deeper than typical when it comes to the topics. So if there's anything you'd like to even just hear us talk about, if you don't necessarily want to chime in yourself, feel free to suggest it.
Yes, even though we already have one suggestion, at least, which is why bother with philosophy. But we can have other alternatives and then.
I ask myself that every.
Yeah. So, all right. Yes, that's about it. Thank you so much again for being so constant with us during the spring semester. I know we were supposed to be 1 hour type of a deal meeting, but we never really hold into it. It seems like you guys kind of have enough of philosophy. Sometimes I wonder why, whatever. But yes, thank you. Essentially, I think the meeting is over. If you want to hang around and talk a little bit more, that's fine. But you're not morally obliged to it. Unless you're a bad person, then we can talk about it.
Have a good final to the semester. Good luck with everything, folks. Good luck during finals week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Later.
Later, alligator.
In a while.